Only a 5-minute flight from Walter Reed, the helicopter pad at Bethesda Naval Hospital, where the autopsy team awaited the arrival of Kennedy's body. Medical technician Paul O'Connor was there.
I remember it being about 8 o'clock in the evening that we heard helicopters. I heard helicopters. And it sounded to me like there were two helicopters. Couldn't tell where they were coming from or where they went, but it sounded like they were landing. A few minutes later, the door burst open in the back of the hospital, and in came 6 or 8 men carrying a casket.
It was here that Commanders Humes and Boswell, with Colonel Fink, were making their preparations for the autopsy of the century. Assisting them was medical technician Paul O'Connor.
The morgue door burst open, and 6 or 7 men came carrying this casket in and set it on the floor next to the table, autopsy table. As I remember, this casket was a type of casket that was a cheap shipping type of casket. What I mean by a shipping casket is that it's not a very ornamental casket. It's not very expensive. It's a very plain casket.
This is not the casket in which Al Reich placed the president's body at Parkland Hospital, Dallas.
It was a expensive bronze-colored type. It was a bronze casket. One of the most expensive that we had in stock. It was a white satin lining inside the casket. We wrapped him in one of the sheets and just placed him in the casket that way.
The casket was opened, and inside was a slate gray rubber body bag with a zipper that ran from the head all the way down to the toes. It's the kind of body bag that you find people that were carried out of a disaster in. We unzipped the body bag, and inside was the body of the president. We put the body on the table. He was nude, no clothes on, but he had a white sheet, bloody white sheet wrapped around his face and his head.
So between Parkland Hospital in Dallas and the autopsy in Washington, the president's body had mysteriously been placed in another casket and also wrapped differently. America's finest forensic pathologists were not appointed to perform the autopsy of the century. Instead, naval career men with meager experience of such work were chosen. As forensic pathologist, Dr. Cyril Wecht explains.
Humes and Boswell were in charge of hospital pathology at Bethesda, just like hospital pathologists in civilian life. They had had no formal training or experience or practice in forensic pathology. It was incredible that Humes and Boswell should have been selected to perform this autopsy.
Actually, these two doctors, Dr. Boswell and Dr. Humes, became commanding officers of a particular school, which was the school that I was attending. And their jobs in those days was more administrative than it was actually laying the hands on to people to do autopsies and such. I'd never seen them do autopsies all the time that I was there. As a matter of fact, I never even saw them ever come in the morgue.
There were, we know, about 33 people officially logged in the autopsy room that night. We know that there was an admiral, there was a general, there were F.B.I. and Secret Service people. And these people, Humes and Boswell, were career military people, just a couple of years shy of retirement. They were not about to stand up and say to their superior officers, we're going to do it our way. No way would they say that.
There were kind of mysterious civilian people in civilian clothes were there. It seemed like they commanded a lot of respect and attention. They would come up and look over my shoulder or look over Dr. Boswell's shoulder and run back, and they'd have a little conference in the corner. And then all at once there's an order comes down and says, stop what you're doing and go to the other procedure. And that's the way it was all night. And we just jumped back and forth, back and forth. There was no smooth flow of the procedure at all.
The reports had been that the president had been shot from the rear, from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building. And the evidence at hand from the Parkland Hospital doctors of a small, neat wound in the neck was contradictory to that, or at least complementary to that, in the sense that it required that there be a shot from in front, so that if he were shot from the rear, he was also being shot at the same time from in front. And so I telephoned Bethesda Naval Hospital. The officer of the day I knew, and he put me quickly through to Dr. James Humes, who was going to head the autopsy team. He was very cordial, and we had a good conversation, brief. He had not heard about the neck wound. He left the telephone momentarily and came back and said, "Dr. Livingston, I'm sorry, I can't continue this conversation. The FBI won't let me."
When somebody is shot and killed, they usually do what they call a legal post-mortem. And that involves plotting a trajectory of a missile, where it comes in and goes out, and what angle it was. And we didn't do any of that at all. They weren't really interested, it seems, on how it happened, where it happened from. Nobody had mentioned whether he had got shot in the front or the back or the side or what. But what really scared me was about several days later, after the autopsy, we were ordered into the commanding officer's office, all of us that had anything to do with the autopsy, where we signed orders that stated, under penalty of general court-martial, you will not divulge any information or talk to anybody. That's what scared me.
Dr. Cyril Wecht.
If the brain was not sectioned, then there could be no visualization of its interior. It's as if it never existed. I am very, very suspicious, and I do think that it could have been the height of a sinister conspiratorial activity in the post-assassination cover-up in this case, to make sure that the brain was not examined in order to be able to disprove, or at least to be able to withhold the attempts by other people, me and other critics, to prove that there was a second gunman firing from the right side. Because again, you see, that gets to the question of whether or not there was a conspiracy.
The National Archives in Washington received a metal tray containing all the vital medical materials relating to the case, including the president's brain. An inventory check 3 years after the assassination revealed that these items had vanished.
In that inventory of October 30th, 1966, that metal tray containing the brain and the Kodachromes and the microscopic autopsy tissue slides are no longer listed. So somewhere between April of 65 and the end of October 66, these things were literally taken illegally, stolen, removed from the National Archives. And to this day, as we sit and talk, nobody in the United States government has ever accounted for these missing items. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what this would mean in a routine murder case? I can tell you, as a forensic pathologist testifying in a courtroom, if I came in a murder that not many people cared about, and the other side was asking, where is the brain, and did you examine it, and what did you find, and so on, and I said, well, I chose not to examine it. Where is it? Can you examine it today, or our experts want to examine it? Well, I don't have it any longer. It was discarded, or so on. You know what would happen to that case, probably? The judge would throw it out of the courtroom. But in this case, the government hasn't been concerned, and my colleagues in forensic pathology were not concerned, and yet there's not one of them would ever tolerate that kind of aberrant, unacceptable, unethical, immoral, and illegal procedure or policy in his own office. Not one of them. So we see that Humes and Boswell were indeed controlled, and we know from their own records that they, Humes and Boswell, were not professionally competent and expert in the realm of forensic pathology. And that's how you got a botched, horribly inadequate, inept, inadequate, superficial medical legal autopsy in the case of John F. Kennedy.